I'm Mark Dolan, and you are watching GB News America. It's time now to speak to renowned historical author, broadcaster, and philosopher, Dr. Taylor Marshall. Dr. Taylor, privileged to have you on the channel. A broken economy, a divided society. America, what happened?
We've had a rough last couple of years here. And, we had a good go with President Trump. It was not perfect, but we had a lot of acceleration. I think both on a spiritual level, but on a political level as well. And, we elected Joe Biden, and the wheels have come off in the last couple of years. And we're now, wrapped up in 2 wars and a declining economy and a difficult stock market. And I would say in America, discouragement, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, a Christian, a non-Christian, there is a general discouragement in the United States of America. And I don't know if we continue to go the way of decline and see things that have happened in certain European countries, or if we're able to lift out of this nosedive. I guess they'll wait and see in the next election cycle.
And what's happened to America? Is it a spiritual crisis or just an issue with policy?
It's absolutely a spiritual crisis. Grace flows downstream. All grace comes, all goodness comes from Almighty God. And America has always had a religious sense to it. And that's been lost in particular over the last, you could say 60 years, but in particular, the last 10 to 20 years. If you just look at the demographics, the polls, you see that belief in God has gone down. And, you kind of see that in real demographics, like the birth rate, divorce rate. These indicators show that the American people are losing their fervor. And, America had more of a spiritual sense, I think even more than Europe in the last 50 years. And it's difficult to see that. I chalk it up to a very aggressive media campaign, both in film, news, advertising, commercial. It's becoming very strong, and there's a strong anti-family bent that's growing in the United States of America. So, yeah, it's most definitely spiritual, and the work I'm in is, of course, political, but also trying to revive the idea of Christ as King. And there is nothing wrong with saying these should be our political convictions, our political beliefs, and we're going to work together because, I don't know, you find them in the Bible, or they are part of natural law, or this is historic Christian political theory. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think Christians have shied away from that too long. They think, oh, we can't bring our convictions and our faith into the public space. That's created a vacuum, and that vacuum has been filled with radical secularism and agendas that are against the family and against the common good of our nation, United States of America. And of course, that's the same experience in other Western countries.
So the woke takeover of the West and the United States in particular, cancel culture, stifling political correctness, gender ideology, critical race theory, you name it, a whole bunch of contested and frankly bonkers ideas. You think this has replaced Christianity?
Yes, in particular in the United States in the last 10 to 5 years, the BLM, the Black Lives Matter, there's this increased racial tension. When I was growing up, I think there was less racial tension in the 80s and 90s than there are now in the 2020s in the United States of America. I think the Democratic Party has fostered that. It's a form of Marxism, social Marxism, and putting classes against one another, maybe not economic classes, but ethnic classes. And then also, the LGBT agenda has really been pushed strongly in the last 5 years, really, politically and in the media. And that has eroded a sense of family. They said, oh, we just want to be married. It's just private between us. But it's really been pushed down the American people's throats. And although some are pushing back, if you look at the polls, again, you just look at real facts, more and more Americans are becoming not just tolerant, but acceptant of that radical agenda. And that doesn't bode well for us.
Indeed. What is behind wokeism and what is the end game, do you think? What is the goal?
The end game, wokeism is ultimately atheism. Wokeism is, well, you could even say beyond atheism, it's Luciferian. It is, I will not serve, I will define reality. Instead of seeing reality as it is in nature, or as God has defined reality. That's how humans, at least in Christendom, have operated for close to 2,000 years. Instead, I will define myself. I will not serve. And so everything is for debate. So if you say, well, we can define marriage, or the state can define marriage, that means the state can define anything. It can define personhood. It can define what is a man, what is a woman, everything. And once we allow the governments to have that authority, we are giving them divine powers to redefine what is reality. And that has to be taken back. That has to be lodged safely again with the church, and the church having her proper influence over government. Because there, again, going back to the vacuum, there can be no vacuum. There has to be a definition of what is holy matrimony, and a definition of what it is to be a man, and what it is to be a woman, and what is a family. And that definition was given to us at the very beginning of creation. There's a story there, Adam and Eve and the family and marriage and man and woman. It's all laid out there. If we reject that, then ultimately it's up to some sort of demographic experiment on what is matrimony, what is family, what is man, what is woman. If we don't have those categories and those substances defined in our minds, then we're going to lose the war. And I think in America, in a democracy, so-called, Christians, you see this with JFK. He said, well, my faith is not going to influence my policies. That is sort of the 1950s, 1960s understanding that we will allow there to be a neutrality in the public square, and we will privately have our own beliefs. Well, we started that in the 50s and the 60s, and then as soon as we got into the 90s and the 2000s, that vacuum began to be filled. And radical secularism, Marxism has filled in that void. And so I think there are a lot of, on your side of the sea and on ours, there's a lot of great minds who are saying, now, wait a second, this idea that Christians pretend to be neutral and do not put their convictions into the public square, we will lose 10 out of 10 times if we do that.
Well, indeed, I want to ask you, if woke has won, is there any rowing back from this toxic ideology?
I think there is. We reach low points, and sometimes, you look at something like the French Revolution, which was so thoroughgoing in all of French thinking, life, economics, and there was a recovery from that, a little rough, little bumpy. But I think there can be, death and sin always consume and eat themselves. There are no friends in hell. Ultimately, everyone hates themselves and hates one another. So, the demonic cannot thrive forever. Maybe this is the end, and maybe that's that. But I do believe, I'm a Catholic. I'm a Christian. I do believe that resurrection follows crucifixion. And if we have to go through crucifixion, and maybe the United States of America will have to make a fundamental change. Maybe it will break into pieces. I'm a Texan. I'm from Texas. Maybe great states. I think Texas is like the number 8 economy in the world. Maybe Texas, and as the United States becomes weaker, maybe there is a breaking apart and the United States are no longer united. Those are all possibilities, and that may be the way forward.
Well, indeed, of course, we've seen during the pandemic really, really totalitarian measures in states like New York and California, whereas the freedom-loving red states, Florida and Texas, attracted many people during the pandemic, and many people since, because they have freedom of speech and true American values. So do you think America could have some kind of manifestation of another civil war?
I think it's possible. Maybe 5 years ago, I would have been more positive on that. But I think since the COVID-19 situation, it was discouraging in the United States of America to see how many people who count themselves as politically conservative bend the knee to the state. You know, they wore the mask, they got the injection, and there was not as much resistance. Of course, as you say, in certain states like Texas and Florida, there was pushback, but across the United States, most people gave in and they lost their spirit. And so when you talk about could there be a civil war, if people can't even stand up for not wearing masks or getting certain medical procedures that are against their conscience, I worry about that right there. And I think that gave a lot of confidence to the Marxists, to the secularists, that was maybe a trial. And they realized, wow, a lot of the people who are opposed to us did comply. They did stay in their house. They did put on the mask. And that worries me as well. But they kind of tried it again. They kind of floated out more virus talk in the United States in the last 6 months, and it was shot down. It did not work. So it might be that Americans have had enough, and maybe in round two, they would resist. So that is a sign of hope.
Let's hope they've woken up and can actually believe their eyes and ears, which the state has been telling them for a few years now not to do so. I know you don't believe in divorce, but what about an American divorce? If the country were to break up and have parts of the country that have true traditional American values and others that don't, what would that look like? How would that happen?
Well, the really difficult part would be the states having to counter the powerful military complex of the federal United States government. That right there, you know, that would be a miracle. That would be an Alamo or a Lepanto moment for that to actually happen. But if it were able to happen, and maybe in a more peaceful way, probably the most likely way for that to happen would be for the federal government to lose its power, its influence, and to sort of erode in its strength and its influence. If that were to happen, I think it certainly would. And what you would see is certain states, and let's just use Texas and Florida as examples, they are such powerful economic sources. You know, both states are sea states. We both have access to the ocean. Our trade is strong. Our production is strong. Our birth rates are strong. All these things, I think if we were unshackled from the taxation and the burdens that we have with the federal government, I think some of these states, particularly Florida, Texas, and other conservative states as well, would thrive and would become very powerful. Texas is a big place. It takes a long time to drive across our state, and we have mountains and prairies and fields and agriculture and oil. We have lots of oil, and we have access to the ocean. We would take off. We would thrive. And so, of course, the United States doesn't want that. So if that were to happen, I think it would be very bad for certain states that are landlocked and don't have a thriving economy. Without the support and sustenance of the United States, certain states would really downward spiral into the abyss. It'd be really bad. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, to use an analogy, you look at, you know, the British Empire, and it was held together. But as time went on, you know, certain places got independence and broke off and declined or thrived or whatever. I think you would see something similar with the United States.
Well, I'm sure you're right. I think if states like Florida were more independent and self-governing, then they would win the historic argument in the way that East versus West Germany demonstrated so much about socialism versus capitalism and Western liberal values. I mean, let's look at America's crumbling cities, San Francisco, Seattle, and even New York now. This is socialism in action.
Yeah, in Chicago, and you look at the murder rates, you look at the poverty rates, you look at the drug rates, you look at out-of-wedlock births, teen births. These are all in the cities and the states dominated by the liberal agenda, by the Democrats, by socialism. And yeah, you just extend that out for 1, 2, 3 decades, and you have a very serious problem. So they either completely decline, or they have to themselves reestablish themselves on proper principles. And again, proper principles is just guiding yourself according to the order that God established. That's it. That's it. To the extent that you can do that, you will be blessed, you will thrive, you will rejoice. And to the extent that you don't do that, you will decline. And we've seen that over and over in the history of mankind. And we're seeing it again. It's amazing that people are still falling for these socialistic Marxist lies and thinking if we just try it one more time, it's going to work. It's not going to work. Look around. It's failing.
Correct. And a cursory glance at the history books will tell you the same thing. You are, of course, a renowned historic author, both historic fiction and history books as well. Let's talk about education, because this is where the brainwashing starts when it comes to these progressive ideas.
Yeah, the main problem in America is our universities, private and public, have become mechanisms of indoctrination across the entire country. Even more conservative colleges are now having, the lesbian studies and the intersectionality and all these things are happening across the entire country. And in particular, for women who are college educated between 18 and 22 and thereafter, they majority vote Democrat. They vote for policies that are more in line with secularism in the United States of America. That's a big problem. Also, the COVID situation really woke up American parents, because for the first time, they were recording classes and streaming them. So parents got to actually sit in on the classes and watch. And they said, what is going on here? What are they talking about? Why is there a trans flag in the front of the church? Why are they having drag queens come in and read stories to the children? So this ignited the homeschooling movement, which is going strong in the United States of America. I don't know about Europe, but in the United States, the homeschooling movement is really thriving. And a lot of people think homeschooling, oh, that's just like a mom at the kitchen table with their children. Often it is, but most of the time and more, what you're seeing is really good teachers, renowned teachers, even professors who are opening up streamed online courses where young people and young adults are getting the tip top of education with access to some of these great teachers. So homeschooling is now, with the advent of Zoom and Skype and all these platforms, has really become mainstream, important. And I think the quality of it is only increasing year by year. 10 years ago, I started something called the New St. Thomas Institute, and we stream online courses in philosophy, history, and theology. And that pattern, I think, will continue to move forward, because why would you want to pay $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year to go to a secular institution that's going to tell you that everything that your family believes and your own family tradition and your political history and your religion is all bogus and bad, and you need to pay reparations and be sorry for it, when you could access some of the best? Let's say you want to study the Civil War. You could find the best teachers and professors in the Civil War and have direct contact with them, just as we are right now, through a Zoom link. That right there is going to change education globally. It's going to give more and more people access to good education. It's going to increase competition. My guess is over the next 10 to 20 years, the American collegiate institutions will decline. There will be a decline.
Most likely here in the UK as well. And it's not just higher education, is it? It's in this country, and certainly in America, I've read primary and secondary school, high school, where some youngsters are transitioning without the parents knowing. It seems like the state wants to freeze the family out of the equation altogether.
That's right. How is homeschooling promoted and allowed in the UK?
Yeah, but it's fledgling.
Yeah. Okay.
It really is fledgling, because it's such a big commitment for families. As you know, they have to have, at least one parent available to take on that massive responsibility. But I think it will grow. And I think, you're seeing it. I think there's a bigger home education culture in the States already, isn't there?
I think so. Like you said, it does require the nuclear family, two parents, one parent winning the bread and the other parent at home. So it does require that traditional family. Of course, secularists don't want that. They want the father working, the mom working, and then they want their children to be placed under the custody of the state, where they are completely indoctrinated, so that the family values from one generation, the mother and the father, are not passed down to the next generation. That right there is very scary. And I think that's one reason why in America, we do have a strong family culture. One reason in America is we're seeing that, and a lot of people are making that change. You talk to people now at a cocktail party or a business dinner or after church on Sunday. It's remarkable how many people since COVID-19 have switched over to homeschooling. Probably my own experience is unique because I run in conservative circles, but I would say maybe 1/3 of families that I talk to have made that switch and are doing that. So there is a lot of hope there. And again, if you can pass down the tradition, the culture, the faith from one generation to another, that's how it was designed to be. If you can do that, then you'll have a very strong next generation to resist. If you can't do that, then the new minds, they are going to be gradually poisoned and strangled out. That's a problem. So it has to be addressed.
Yes, and they'll be the leaders of the future, of course, in corporations, public policy, top levels of politics and beyond, broadcasting, the media, you name it, Dr. Taylor Marshall. Let me ask you about the President Joe Biden, clearly in a state of severe cognitive decline. Why isn't this a bigger story?
Well, it is covered quite a bit in the United States. One of the advantages that we also have moving forward is we have an alternative media, which you're a part of. Twitter has opened up again. And so a lot of the stories, a lot of the anecdotes, the reels, the stories, the outtakes are being pushed viral. So that's good. And I think although the mainstream media is not covering the mental and physical decline of President Joe Biden, you daily see, if you're on, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, X, you see these viral clips going around of some of the embarrassing and sad comments and performance of Joe Biden. Of course, the mainstream media pushed him, and they have to cover it up. We're going into another election. There's a lot of debate on whether Joe Biden will run the second term. I think a lot of that depends on how well they can cover it up. It's very clear to Americans, left and right, that Joe Biden does not seem to be the executive. He does not seem to be the one calling the shots. There are puppet masters behind the scenes. And this is something that is just a big problem with American democracy, is we can have billionaires from Dubai and billionaires from Europe and from Asia who can contribute to the campaigns of our candidates and push them they can't vote. But as you know, a big campaign fund is better than one vote. And that is just a fatal problem, a fatal flaw in American politics, is we have so much international influence in our elections.
Can we talk about Israel? Is Israel's war America's war?
Oh, I think a lot of Americans believe that. I think a lot of Americans are very attached to Israel. It goes back to our involvement in the Second World War, our antagonism against Adolf Hitler, the Nazi regime. And although Americans don't have, say, the generational guilt that maybe a German experiences, we do have this patriotic history of, we went in, we helped Europe, we destroyed Hitler, and we helped the Jews. And that right there is sort of extrapolated over the decades into, we always are going to help Israel. They are our ally. And so it becomes there's a lot of extreme support where it's like, nuke every Palestinian, destroy, wipe it out. And I think there's also a lot more sober analysis of what is Israel, what should Israel be, where do Palestinians go, where do Jews go. One other thing that kind of complicates things in the United States that I think a lot of Europeans might not fully appreciate is the American fundamentalist, or the American evangelical Protestants, are very much given to this theology called dispensationalism. And dispensationalism is It actually was started in Southwest England by a man named Darby, but it's very popular in America and very popular in the American South. It holds that God originally has his primary plan, his plan A for Israel, the Jews, and then his plan B is the church and Christianity. And that kind of, it's not really what is accepted by Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Anglicanism, Lutheranism. It's sort of a 1800s aberration. And that is very much part of the evangelical American Protestant ethos. And so because of that, they very much believe that it's not just a political mandate going back to the 1940s, it's actually a theological mandate to support the state of Israel. So I think generally in the South and amongst evangelicals, they are rah, 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 pro-Israel, no matter what. I think if you go into more of the conservative intellectual circles, or maybe in some of the Catholic circles or Anglican or Eastern Orthodox, there's a little bit more of a sober, nuanced take on that.
Reading between the lines, Dr. Marshall, it seems to me that you would rather Donald Trump won the next election than Joe Biden or another Democrat. However, is he a satisfactory candidate for you, given that he's not the most godly character?
Well, of course, I would like King Louis IX or something like a saint on the throne. The American experiment doesn't quite grant us that luxury, and so often we are left choosing the lesser of two evils. And again, I don't think to say that I don't mean Donald Trump is an evil man or malicious or bad. And again, I was part of the Trump campaign in the previous one. I did kind of throw out a presidential candidacy attempt this year, because not that I thought that I would beat out Donald Trump, but I wanted to throw in my hat and say, some of the deficiencies in Trump's campaign, and I'll list them right here. I think number one is, although he did appoint the judges to reverse Roe v. Wade regarding abortion, the right for abortion, which is very good. And I was at Mar-a-Lago for a dinner that recognized Trump for that, and very grateful, very happy, thrilled. He's not has been as consistently pro-life as most, I think, Republicans and most Christians would like. He's also beyond tolerant, I think, when it comes to the LGBT agenda. And I think that bothers some people as well. But I think when it comes to international policy, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to ultimately appointing the proper judges and pushing the right legislation, I have little doubt in my mind that if he were still president, we would not have had the disaster in Afghanistan. The conflict in Ukraine would not have been as escalated as it is. And I don't think we would have this Israeli-Palestinian conflict at all if Trump were in power, because he ruled with strength. He was very clear. And I think the enemies of our nation see Joe Biden and see the Democrats as weak and as an opportunity to take up space and to move their agenda. So, I would vote for Donald Trump again. But I'm hoping in the United States we have candidates who are more Christocentric, more Christ-focused. And I think ultimately that's the only way we're going to redeem our culture, our society.
Setting Donald Trump to one side, do you still have faith in the Republican Party to ultimately make America great again and to win these battles?
I don't. Sadly, I don't. 5 years ago, I would have been saying yes with reservations. The Republican Party over the past 2 years has, I believe, failed American conservatives. It's extremely weak. This is the moment under Joe Biden. We have 4 years to build unity and strength and to really shine the light on his mistakes and problems, and they have not done that. It's an internal fight. It is squabbling. And what's sad is, when you look at the left, you look at the Democrats, they are very united in the policies they want. If you asked every single Democratic senator and member of the House on a number of issues, whether it was, gay marriage or abortion or pharmaceutical, whatever it is, they would all pretty much be lockstep. And you come over to the Republicans and it's not. And, you know, we have a saying here, rhinos, Republican in name only. And the rhinos are there and they're strong. And, you know, we just had this huge coup with the Speaker of the House. And again, there's just not a lot of strength. There's not a lot of confidence. There's not a lot of unity. And that's a big cause for concern. If politically, how are we going to move forward when we are not putting together a strong team effort moving into another election? So I would say firmly, I am not confident in the Republican Party at the moment.
Meghan and Harry make a lot of headlines in the United States and back here at home. Would you like us to take Harry back so you can have a quiet life?
Please take them back. Yeah, you know, Americans love, our history is we rejected and we hate monarchy and the king and all these things, but deep down inside, we love it. Americans are obsessed with monarchy and nobility and tradition and throne and altar and all of these concepts. We love, that's all we watch on TV, the miniseries, the movies. This is what the American mind is fascinated with. And I honestly believe that America will move towards a form of monarchy. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think it might take many decades. But I think ultimately that is a trajectory as we see the democratic process become gutted. That will create a vacuum for a very strong central monarchical leadership. I do believe that.
Let's hope it's not Queen Kim Kardashian. The clock's against us, Dr. Marshall. You've had an amazing career. You've written so many books. You're a philosopher, an educator, a broadcaster, and much beyond. Father of 8, I think, so that keeps you busy. What's next for you?
Well, you know, my main gig is the New St. Thomas Institute. We deliver online courses all over the world. We're in about 60 nations. So if you want to study the Old Testament, New Testament, philosophy, political theory, church history, anything like that, go to nsti.com. Writing a couple of books and just slowly getting more involved in the public space and in the political sphere, and hoping to extend that beyond our nation and into other countries as well. And yeah, I think we're at a pivotal moment right now in history. That's not just for the United States; it's for the entire world. And we are up against a great darkness. That this battle is about the family, and what is the family, and how we can pass on the legacy that God has given us, and fight these new demons with new rules and new empires. That is the battle of our day. And so I think, you know, good people like yourself and people who are waking up all across the world, we need to unite together. We need to join forces, and we have to slay this dragon.
Dr. Taylor Marshall, thank you so much for joining us on GB
Thank you.
America.